Greetings from Tokyo. This is Daisuke Beppu. I hope you are having a very nice day today. Continuing with my discussion of the films in the Criterion collection, I'd like to talk to you today about Spine number 9, Hard Boiled. This is a film that was released in 1992. This is a Hong Kong action film, a very violent, over-the-top action film, starring Chow Yun-fat and Tony Leung in very memorable roles. Chow Yun-fat plays a police officer named Tequila, and he is quite an interesting police officer. This is the DVD from the Criterion collection, and this is the 126-minute release of the film. Now, this has, among other things, an audio commentary by John Woo and producer Terence Chang and filmmaker Roger Avery and critic Dave Kerr. And it also has trailers for earlier films, 11 of John Woo's early Hong Kong films, including the films that he made in the first half of his career at Golden Harvest, and then after that from the mid-80s up to this film, Hard Boiled. And it also has a student film by John Woo, and also has a guide to Hong Kong crime films. Okay. So what I will do, as per my usual custom, is I will now talk about the film specifically. Now, again, this will be talking in detail about the film. So if you haven't seen the film Hard Boiled, I suggest you stop this video now and try to find this film. And then when you finish watching it, please come back and I'd be happy to talk with you and continue our discussion of this film Hard Boiled. So, this is a very stylized, over-the-top action film, and this has Chow Yun-fat as Tequila, the very suave, very cool, and just invincible super cop. And he is just one of those great, iconic character creations. The first 10 minutes of this film are just something to behold. It's a contender for greatest action opening sequence ever. It's certainly a contender, I think, also for greatest opening ever. If ever you are talking to a friend and maybe the friend doesn't know John Woo films, I think the best thing you can do is to show that person the first 10 minutes of Hard Boiled, and that will give that person a sense of what John Woo is all about. Everything is packed into it's like a mini movie. The first 10 minutes is like a mini movie, and you've got that wonderful music, you know, da 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 da, and you've got those wonderful stunts, and again we have John Woo employing those wonderful John Woo laws of physics. In other words, guns don't usually run out of bullets until the precise moment when it becomes so dramatic. You get shot, it doesn't matter, you know, some guy, the bad guy gets shot in the leg, it doesn't matter, he can still stand up and do his thing with the machine gun, no problem. Gun battles are like fights. They're like hand-to-hand combat fights, so they're up close, and then they're usually, you know, one guy takes, does a little thing, and it goes like that, and goes back and goes like that. So it has a certain rhythm to it that is so infectious, and you've got a real clear sense of what's going on, even as the set is becoming just bullet-ridden, and shots are fired and things are falling apart, and suddenly the geography becomes all warped and misshapen, and you got completely lost. But it's still somehow or another quite easy to follow for the most part. And this is all thanks to the wonderful direction, the suspense that's generated, and also there's a real feeling of when certain people die, there is a real impact to that, especially towards the scene's end when one of the, I guess it's a partner or the companion, the police companion, dies in a very violent way, just gets riddled with bullets. So, and this is just the first 10 minutes, my goodness. And then you've got the film that progresses with a very, I think, complicated plot involving an informant in the Chinese mafia, and also there's not just one informant in the Chinese mafia, but there's also an undercover cop, doing undercover as a gangster. That's Tony Leung's character, and he is a killer, and he sort of sets the main plot in motion, as it were, when he kills a guy in the library. And this is a guy who works for Johnny. So Johnny is the Anthony Wong character, and he's a real kind of sleazy, crazy character, very dangerous. And this starts the plot in motion, where Johnny is trying to take control from the boss, Hui. And indeed, he does take control when he arranges the ambush at the docks, the warehouse. And you've got that wonderful scene where Johnny's forces they attack the place with their motorcycles and the cars, and you've got the motorcycles flying, and they're hitting people, and the guns, and then you've got that wonderful dramatic moment where Tony Leung has to prove his loyalty to Johnny, and then he has to kill the old boss Hui. And there's that wonderful emotional moment between the two of them before, boom, he just kills him. And then not only him, he kills the rest of his men there. So it's quite a dramatic moment. And then of course you've got Chow Yun-fat coming in with he just comes in on a rope and just does that thing when the smoke goes, and he's just like a one-man army, and it's just amazing. So already we have the sense of John Woo knowing how to up the ante. So you've got that wonderful opening 10 minutes, and then you've got a nice introduction of a kind of a complicated plot involving police trying to infiltrate the gang, and then Tony, who we end up discovering is the undercover cop. And we don't realize this until this middle action sequence in this warehouse, and then all the chaos ensues, and Hui dies, and Johnny essentially takes over the operations. And we realize that Tony is, maybe he's a little bit unhinged, because he does kill Hui and his men. But also we realize in that wonderful moment in the smoke, and you have Chow Yun-fat and Tony Leung together, and Chow Yun-fat, it's at that moment, of course, that he runs out of bullets. But then Tony decides not to kill him. And this helps Chow Yun-fat's character Tequila to realize that in fact Tony is a undercover cop. So this then leads to more intrigue and police intrigue, and Tony and Tequila trying to sort of work together in order to bring down Johnny. Okay, so already we have this really packed, super packed action film, and you've got these already two wonderfully memorable and over-the-top zany action sequence. So you think, how can this film get any better? I mean, we've already seen two wacky, nuts action sequences. So how can this get any better? Well, heck, let's put all the bad guys into a hospital, and let's have all this stuff about, oh, the weapons are in the basement, and let's have this idea about there's bombs being set off in the hospital with these people, the patients and the doctors, and let's have them hostage, and let's have all the police raid, and let's do a huge shootout, and let's have the two heroes go in there and trying to save, and let's have some babies, and let's have Johnny's kind of dangerous sidekick, Mad Dog, come in and do his little thing with the guns and the flips and his martial arts, and let's just have all of that together. And this final super brawl of an action sequence, and just to top it all off, let's have a long take of the two guys just shooting people in these smoky hallways, and let's have Chow Yun-fat, Tequila, carrying a baby and just holding onto an electric wire and riding out of a hospital as it explodes behind him, carrying a baby. It's just a wonderful set piece. So it just goes to show that John Woo knows how to build a film. He starts with a confined, super dense action sequence at the beginning, and then in the middle we've got this wider expanse in the warehouse with the motorcycles, and then he tops it all off with this huge exploding hospital. It's just the building of action set piece upon action set piece is just second to none. And I should add also that hospital sequence is really it's really deep in some places, is it not? Because remember, you've got the moment, the really powerful moment when the two of them are just shooting it out. It's like a video game, and just shooting out. You don't quite know. You just see these shadows of people coming out, and they just shoot them, and then they die. And then there's a terrible moment when Tony shoots the guy, and he's a cop. Oh my goodness. And it just, the camera does a little slow motion, and then they go into the elevator, the two of them, and Tequila is trying so hard to just calm him down given the situation. He says, just don't, and he's trying to make him just realize the situation that they're in, and just make sure that Tony doesn't lose it. But in fact, he did kill a cop, which is just a terrible moment. And I think it's wonderful to have that particular moment in the middle of this action sequence, because it just shows it's not just a shoot 'em up. I mean, most of it is, but there is this moment when we realize that the people that they're shooting, they are kind of human beings, and the fact that he shoots this cop in this really intense part of the action sequence, I think it's a brave choice. I think it's a really wonderful, quite sad and nuanced touch to this otherwise kind of one-note action sequence. So having this element in there makes it a bit more complicated, which I really appreciate. And I should also add that I love the character of Mad Dog, Philip Kwok. And I love him because he's got a certain code of ethics and honor. He's a real dangerous man. He's so deadly. He's so deadly with a gun and a machine gun, but he's also deadly with his martial arts. And yet, he has a sense of honor. He doesn't like it when some of the doctors and patients are there. He won't kill Tony. In fact, he agrees. Remember that scene when Tony and Mad Dog are fighting in the hospital, and then they realize that between them there is a bunch of doctors and patients, and so the two of them very slowly put their guns down on the ground, and they make eye contact with each other, and we realize that they will have their way with each other, but first they will agree to let these people leave. What a powerful moment that is. And then to top it all off, remember, then Johnny comes in and just shoots them all down anyway, and this angers Mad Dog to the point where he attacks Johnny, and then Johnny just shoots Mad Dog. So we realize that Mad Dog is really just an honorable killer, and quite a memorable character. I mean, that's a wonderful way in which we make Mad Dog, who is just a killer, I think much more three-dimensional. And that's another example of how this film takes moments which are otherwise quite kind of action-oriented and just add something to it just to make it more complicated. So I mentioned the scene when Tony shoots the cop during the hospital scene. That's one example. So another example is here by giving us a certain character depth to Mad Dog. And you didn't have to do that. I mean, you could have just left Mad Dog as he was, which was just this dangerous killer. But no, we get this extra dimension to his character, which makes, I think, his demise all the more meaningful. Yeah, it's wonderful. And then, of course, there is Chow Yun-fat as Tequila. Now, I think it could be said that the character of Tequila is maybe playing second fiddle to Tony, because Tony, as the undercover cop, is in many respects perhaps the more complicated character, the more nuanced character, and he is under a very dangerous situation, so perhaps our sympathies are more with him, Tony, rather than the Tequila character, who seems to be more, how should I say, he is the cop, and he is, there's no necessarily, there's no sense of nuance necessarily with respect to his character. He has a certain set of morals, he is cool, he knows what he's doing, and then that's basically it. So there is a sense perhaps that Tony's character maybe eclipses Tequila's character, but actually I think they're perhaps equal, or also maybe Tequila has a certain I think he has a certain complex nature about him as well, and this is revealed, I think, when well, it's revealed in many places. I think, for example, it's revealed when he is talking to his mentor friend in the bar, who's played by John Woo, and they've got these not long scenes, but kind of very short but memorable scenes where John Woo is trying to give advice to the Chow Yun-fat character, which is a really nice touch, not only within the context of the film, but also outside the context of the film, when we realize that this is Chow Yun-fat and John Woo acting out the scene together. But also, my favorite bit with Tequila is the part where let's see. My favorite bit with Tequila is, I like where he is. He makes mistakes, and he is not perfect. But I really appreciate the fact that Chow Yun-fat is willing to show us Tequila's imperfections as a character. He seems to talk too much, and he's a bit too, he reacts too quickly, and he tends to just react and charge first rather than think things through. But when he thinks about things, he realizes that certain aspects of this investigation are worth pursuing. And he does have very good instincts as a police officer. But that scene where he is trying to calm Tony down after Tony has shot the cop, and they're in the elevator, and he's saying, "You didn't kill a cop. It wasn't, it wasn't a cop," etc. He's really lying to him in that moment. But both of them know that Tony killed a cop. But it's really an interesting way that Tequila is trying to calm the situation down by essentially lying to Tony. And it's that psychological it's that way in which Tequila knows how to deal with this psychologically intense moment, which I think is really, it shows that Tequila, I think, is a much smarter character than I first gave him credit for. And I think that's all due to Chow Yun-fat's performance, no question, no question. And of course we've got the great scene that, as I alluded to, of him carrying the baby and just riding out as the hospital explodes behind him. And then that wonderful moment where we realize that Chow Yun-fat is really, or Tequila is probably the best marksman in terms of a gun, and you just need a little target for him, and then boom, he always hits the target, which is just a great classic confrontation scene, just a perfect way to end this otherwise madcap, zany action film. This is one that is a classic. It's one where I think I can essentially, I don't have to think too much about it. I just let the adrenaline rush take me, and I'm just overwhelmed, and I'm just, you know, urging these characters on. And then along the way, there are certain moments when I'm just hit in my heart when I realize the gravity of the situation. But then the adrenaline takes over, and then I am propelled to the conclusion of the film. And it's a real wonderful kind of roller coaster ride, and it's one of the great roller coaster rides, and that is really, in essence, just an example of the power of great cinema. And the reason why I love films like this is that it's just something that is so beyond reality, and something that is so beyond my own perceptions of reality. And it's just its own world, the John Woo world of gun violence. It's quite a fascinating world, and in many respects it's almost, there's a certain grace and beauty about it in terms of how things operate within the confines of this world. So Hard Boiled, it's a madcap, zany, crazy, hugely entertaining action thriller film. Okay, my friends, so let me stop there. I hope that was interesting for you. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to let me know below. And if not, then I hope to see you again, where I will talk about spine number 10, Walkabout. Until we meet again, my friends, I hope you are well, and please take care. Cheers.